Hello everyone, my name is Roy, and in today's recording I'll be showing how you can use an RSS feed with GraphQL. For this, we'll be using the Medium RSS feed, which is available for everyone that has a Medium account. But even if you don't have a Medium account, you can still use the RSS feed of other people. An example, a profile page of a Medium user, even a publication, or maybe a topic page. If you're a fan of GraphQL, React, TypeScript, name any of the other cool technologies, you'll be able to find an RSS feed on Medium. Today we'll be using my personal RSS feed, which can be found at medium.com/feed/@RoyDerks. And as you can see, this is my Medium RSS feed. It is displayed in a browser, and it's also important to know it's XML. So RSS feeds are typically XML, or actually they're always XML, which might let you think back about SOAP APIs. I don't know if anyone ever here worked with a SOAP API. I know I did. And if you think REST is worse than GraphQL, you probably think SOAP is even way worse than GraphQL. Luckily, with StepZen, we got you covered. And it is possible to take this XML API, which is an RSS feed, or it could also be a SOAP API, and convert it to GraphQL. For this, the only thing we need to do is set up a new StepZen project, which I've done in this directory called with RSS. And you can also find this project inside our examples repository on GitHub. So make sure to go in the description and find the link to our GitHub repository with all the example code in there. In this file, or in this directory, I have one file called index.graphql, which is my configuration file to let StepZen know where my schemas lives. And I also have a file called rss.graphql. And this file will contain the GraphQL schema that we generate or actually create for the XML RSS feed. In here, we need to create a query type, and then we need to give our new query a name. So let's say we want to have get posts. And then probably we're going to say it returns JSON. And why this is important is something I will show you later. And then we're going to use an @REST connector. Because with @REST, you can also make HTTP requests to an XML feed or to the RSS feed in this scenario. So we'll be using a @REST directive with, well, maybe not all these different setters, but let's try and put some of in there. So the endpoint will be our Medium feed, which is this one. Copy paste it, put it in there. Configuration is something I don't need. For headers, I actually need to add a special header because we'll be working with XML. So we should let the custom directive @REST know that we'll be working with XML. So we have a header here, which is a typical content type header, telling it we're going to be using XML. We're not going to set a filter, we're not going to set a result route. The only thing we do need to set is something, well, that is quite new. It's called transform. And with this, we can transform the output of the RSS XML feed into JSON, which we'll be needing to use a GraphQL API. Because, as you probably know, GraphQL relies on JSON. So in here, we'll be adding the following line with transforms, which includes pet param, and also the editor XML to JSON. So this way, StepZen will know that we'll be using JSON, that will be converting XML to JSON, so GraphQL can give you the right output. So this is the only thing I need to actually set up a RSS feed in GraphQL with StepZen. So let's try and run this by running StepZen start. So this will take the schema we've created. But first, of course, will ask us whether or not we want to sign in with StepZen. And the cool thing with StepZen is you don't need a StepZen account in order to use the CLI to build and deploy GraphQL APIs. So instead of logging in, we actually will be continuing without logging in. It is one small caveat: the API that will be deployed is public, so it won't be secure and you won't be able to use an API key for protection. Let's press enter. The second question it asks me is how I like to name my endpoint. In this scenario, let's go with API/with RSS. That is the name of the directory. I can see I found an error, unknown argument transform. Did you mean transforms? Well, probably I made a typo, and I did. So luckily the CLI reminded me of the typo I made, which is a great thing to see. And then it outputs me the public API endpoint for this GraphQL API. So if I would be going to my browser. I can go to the GraphQL IDE, which is enabled by default on all the public endpoints. And in here, I'm actually able to run a query against my RSS feed. So I can query and I can say get posts. And you can see it returns a whole load of data. So this is the same data that I have in my XML RSS feed, which you can find here. So the first article would be load testing GraphQL performance with K6 and StepZen. And also in my GraphQL response, we have a story called, let me see where they keep the title. It's below this huge blob of content. It is called load testing GraphQL performance with K6 and StepZen. So you can see it already worked. I already transformed my RSS feed into GraphQL using StepZen. But let's take this a step further. Let's say looking at this, we want to flatten our response a bit because we don't need this top level response. We only need what's within the channel element. For this, we'll be using a configuration set called result root. And with result root, we can actually determine what results should be returned and what shouldn't. So if we go back, I can see we have a path called rss.channel. So this will be my result root. So it's rss.channel like this. And if I save it, StepZen will redeploy this new schema to the cloud, making it available on my public endpoint in several seconds. I would be rerunning this query. You can see the response is a bit smaller. It only has the posts information instead of this whole blob of JSON with other things I don't really need. But to take this even a step further, we probably want to determine which fields are returned, because now I get all these fields, but probably what I want is just a subselection of fields. For this, we'll be using a different StepZen tool, which is called Json to SDL. And with Json to SDL, you can take a JSON blob and transform it into GraphQL types. So this will take JSON and transform it to GraphQL SDL. As you can see, it's a website called json2sdl.com, which we built at StepZen. So you can either start with an example and have it shown with you, or we're just going to take this response, this JSON response from the GraphQL API, and transform it to GraphQL SDL to get the types of this JSON response. I'm just going to copy paste this here. And then I'm going to press convert. Well, depending on the size of your JSON, it might take longer than you think, but as you can see, it's working quite fast. Let me just copy paste this and go back to my VS Code project. So I won't be needing all the types here because type data and type root are auto-generated based, well, they don't really know how we're going to use them later on. So these can be deleted. And then let's have a look at the top level type, which is called getPost. So getPost will be the response of this getPost query. So if we start saving this, StepZen is going to take this new schema and actually redeploy it again. As you can see, it's been done in below 3 seconds. I would go to my GraphQL IDE. I probably need to refresh it just to be sure that my browser also knows that my schema has been updated. And in here, I already see that we have an error because getPost no longer returns JSON. It will now return something of type getPost. So let me get in here and actually determine some things to be returned, like item and then title, in case we only want to return the titles for all these different posts in my RSS feed. So these are all the titles that are coming from my Medium RSS feed. So as you can see, we made it entirely way more simple to actually read this RSS feed with GraphQL and determine which fields you want to show and which fields you don't. You can say creator, which will be the author, me. But of course, you can also use RSS feed of different people. So let's take it one final step back and actually determine the username. Make this a query parameter, because that way other people can also use this piece of code to read their RSS feed from Medium. So username, which will be a string. And then of course in here I need to change my username. Get rid of it here, copy paste it for later because probably it will be useful at some point. And save this. Well, going back to my GraphQL IDE, I can now actually control what is returned here. So I can say username, give me this username, and the data will be there. As you can see, this is still my data. So maybe we should try it out with some other username. So if you are watching this video, go to the description and find the code I'm running now. And you can actually replace it with your own username to be able to query your own RSS feed from Medium using StepZen. And of course, you can use this for every other RSS feed. So RSS is a standard protocol which means it's always the same. So you can probably just swap out the URL for the Medium RSS feed with any other RSS feed. Maybe you need to make some changes to the underlying schema, but this is something you can easily done using the StepZen CLI. So with this, I'd like to thank you. I hope you continue building using this RSS feed GraphQL. And with this, I'd like to end. I hope to see you soon again, so make sure to subscribe to our video or head over to the StepZen Discord or Twitter. And you can find all the links in the description. Thank you. Bye-bye.